Hey, everybody, this is Mark Sims again, asking just a few questions. Just a few questions. I have Atiba Buchanan on the line, and he just reminded me he is the host of Humanity in the Headlines. Atiba, what is Humanity in the Headlines?
Sure, it is a podcast that was born out of the idea that we need to look beyond the numbers. We need to look beyond the statistics and get into the humanity that is behind the headline of any situation. I can give you a real quick story as to how just a microcosm of how it was born. There was a young lady who African American lady whose father was sent to jail when she was two for life for a non-violent drug offense. And when she was 22, she wrote an open letter to the judge that had sentenced her father to tell the judge all the ways in which her life had been impacted by not having her father in her life for something that was, again, a nonviolent offense. And we hear about shootings, and we hear about these travesties that happen, but oftentimes we forget about the human sacrifice, sometimes even the human carnage that can be left behind those things. So humanity in the headlines, we remind everyone that there is a human casualty to all the things that we talk about, and we need to make sure that we remember that as well.
And when can we hear your podcast?
Sure, Saturdays on intellectualradio.com. You can listen to Humanity in the Headlines. We have dozens of shows on YouTube. If you just type in Humanity in the Headlines on YouTube, again, dozens of shows will come up. If not 100 shows will come up, and you're welcome to listen to any prior material. We bring in the best guests from CNN's Keith Boykin. We even did an interview with Judge Shira Shineland. I'm not sure if you know who she is. She is the judge that actually declared New York's stop and frisk unconstitutional. So we had an excellent interview with her. So you name it, we bring in the big guns. We try our best to do that, and we try to bring in the experts on any particular topic. So yeah, there's tons of material anyone can listen to.
Mr. Buchanan, I can't had you come on the podcast to talk about these first three primaries and maybe Super Tuesday, because it's a very Super Tuesday, because I think California's in the
Sure.
big Super Tuesday. So if
Yep.
the elections, all three elections, Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, was held
hmm
today, who would win?
All right. So let's look at the polling. Right. We want to start there. Right now, Elizabeth Warren is surging. So, there's a statistical tie technically between her and Joe Biden in Iowa, which is February 3rd. So you still got some time. Things can definitely change, and they probably will. But she's at 22%, Biden's at 20, which is, again, I'm sure that works within the plus minus of whatever their um, room for error is. And then you got New Hampshire. She's, again, it's another statistical tie, but she's up technically 27 to Biden's 25. But then Biden has a clear lead in South Carolina. He's up, 20 plus points in South Carolina. So right now, Warren is surging, and I really do predict her. My personal prediction is for her to win the Iowa caucus. I don't see how I don't see her losing momentum. Very rarely do we see Elizabeth Warren coming up with gaffes or things that we see, missteps that we may see, where it feels like every other week, if not more often, we see Joe Biden saying something or doing something or saying something, again, that can be misconstrued or misunderstood, or where he's misspoke. And I think those things are beginning to wear on his momentum. As a matter of fact, we know they are, because he's relinquished his lead in many states. So again, for right now, Iowa caucus, I have to go with Elizabeth Warren. New Hampshire, I'm going to have to go with her as well. Just with it being a northern state, I just think she's going to do better there. But South Carolina, because of the black vote, again, Joe Biden. But again, it might be too late by then, so we'll see.
And if Bernie loses New Hampshire, right next door, it could be over for Bernie Sanders.
Well, here's the thing about Bernie. He has a lot of money. And you and I know that how long you stay in this race has well more to do with your ability to afford to stay in it than necessarily the state you win. He'll definitely be competitive, but he'll be able to stay in the race for as long as it is feasible because of the amount of money that he's able to raise, not just in the number of donors, but the gross amount as well. So he's not hurting for anything. Most of the people that you've seen drop out, they don't drop out because they're low in the polls. They drop out because they've run out of money, whether it's Bill de Blasio. Cory Booker just sent an email out, a memo out to his people saying if he doesn't raise a certain amount within a certain time frame, he's going to have to call it quits soon. So Bernie's pretty good because, again, he's either second or at best case or worst case third in fundraising, and sometimes he's first. So
Super Tuesday is March 3rd. It looks like, and that's and some of those states, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he's going to have to win some of those Super Tuesday states. Now, he has money to go all the way to Milwaukee to the convention, and Bernie Sanders has all the money to go to Milwaukee to the convention, at least to make a speech. But do you see Mayor Pete winning some of those Super Tuesday states?
I don't. I think Mayor Pete is necessary for the conversation, as I feel that way about just about every Democratic candidate that's decided to run. But I don't see him ever beating people established like Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren or even Bernie Sanders. He does come up fourth or fifth in much of the polling, but again, even in fourth or fifth place, he is well behind double digits, of any of the front runners. So I don't see anything in his platform that's going to catch fire that's any different than any of the candidates are offering. Most of the Democratic candidates are lockstep in most policies. So again, short of some other candidate having some catastrophic mistake or misstep, I don't see Buttigieg being of any threat to either Warren, Biden, or Sanders.
And you don't see him being on the ticket as vice president any kind of way, do you?
Well, it depends on who the president, who the candidate for the president is. I wouldn't mind seeing Pete be a vice president at all. I think that'd be phenomenal. That's another thing I was thinking about with Joe Biden, and you might want to weigh on this as well. A lot of people, my concern with Joe Biden, because I don't have anything against him other than I don't see a lot of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. And I think the way that he can quell that enthusiasm gap is to have a more progressive vice president pick. I think of anyone, who he picks for vice president is the most important. So, if could I see a Biden Buttigieg ticket? I wouldn't necessarily see it, but I think it could be successful. I'd actually envision more of a Biden Harris ticket.
Right. This is boring me in the sense that I want to talk about. I want to cut this interview off because that's the first three. We're a long way from the primaries, not Iowa, but the other ones. So let me cut this one off. Let me do a part two and talk about the progressive movement moving forward. And I'm gonna bring in Andrew Yang and a few other people in that conversation. Stand by for part two.
Okay.